Welcome to the Tank Podcast. In this week's episode, curator Gareth Evans speaks to director Mike Figgis on his new film Megadoc, his fly-on-the-wall documentary of the making of Francis Ford Coppola's epic Megalopolis. This conversation was taken from the Megadoc premiere, hosted by Tank.
At this point, I'd say really the special thanks is to my dear friend and producer, Tara Leanne. Tara, would you stand up, please? Tara and I worked together for 20 years, and literally it was Tara and me who went to Atlanta. That was it, and then we found a couple of students. But every step of the way, Tara has produced this, and as anybody who's ever tried to produce a film will know, it's one long grind, But so, Tara, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Tara, and thank you again, Mike. I mean, we're in the home of cinema, really, in the UK. This is where the first screening of Moving Image happened in the UK back in 1896, I think it was.
I remember it, yeah.
Yeah, just after it all began over the water. It's an incredible film. It's hugely entertaining. It's massively insightful. It's a real masterclass in how to make a film at any scale, but particularly at the scale that we encounter. You were there very much before, during, and after. It was an incredibly extended period for you. I just wonder if we could go right back to the beginning when you first got that invitation and what you thought beyond, the interest and curiosity you had about seeing a director at work and so on. But what was your first gut reaction to that invitation? And now looking back on it that many years later, how do you think about that arc?
It was primarily practical, which is that there was no, got to tell you something about Francis. To get an answer out of Francis about anything is almost impossible. So things like, is there a budget? Would there be money involved or stuff like that? Forget it. Because he just has this wonderfully affable way of not answering any questions. So I had no idea really. I mean, they were going to pay our fare, that was for sure. Number one, I was just the privilege of being invited to film Francis Ford Coppola was of course I'll be there. My next concern richly was about equipment, because I had no way that I wanted to shoot it like a regular documentary, which he would have allowed. But immediately I thought that's not going to work. So part of my my journey for the last years has been about how to get equipment down to almost one person size, and literally, we shot it literally with Tara, me, and two students, quick lesson with them how to boom or whatever, and then and how small could the camera go, and I took two cameras with me, one a big camera because I felt I should turn up with a big camera, which I ditched after 1 week because it was just a pain in the ass to sort of program. It wasn't quick. You couldn't just pick it up and start shooting. So there were kind of practical things, and then, like I think I say in the documentary, no idea of how it was going to go, which is, it's so exciting when you kind of. I used to wake up every day on the shoot and just kind of, why am I in such a good mood? And it was always because none of this is my problem, and responsibility or anything. All I have to do is be awake and make sure the batteries are charged and I've got enough media, and just be alert to what's going on with my little camera. So that was my initial thought, and then you get there and you immediately start adjusting.
You mentioned in the film, of course, you've got this sort of hybrid status. You're thinking, you're a director, of course. You've also made other documentaries, but it's not your film, and yet you are filming. And, we have those interesting moments with Adam Driver and his relationship to the two kinds of camera. But you do occupy this very interesting, singular position of being involved and not involved simultaneously, because you seem to be everywhere. You seem to have access to almost every space, except maybe Francis's bathroom. And, you are really, covering an exceptional waterfront over an extended period of time, many, many months. Give us a sense of that kind of mapping. I mean, you talk a little bit about what you're looking for, but then you've got to map a much larger environment, and you get behind the scenes, you're talking to people off set, etc. How did that start to kind of reveal itself?
Yeah, it was very interesting because when we first turned up, Francis hadn't told anybody that we were coming or who I was, you know. So I was just, for the first couple of days, this really annoying guy that was sort of, I just annoyed everybody. And then it's just this funny moment, Shia LaBeouf, he was very friendly, and he sort of said, Francis said something like, in passing, he said, da-da-da-da-da. He mentioned time code, except he called it timeline. He said, because he's very interested in real-time filmmaking, he said, well, actually, Mike made a really interesting film, Timeline, right, Mike? And I went, time code. And then Shia LaBeouf said, what is Francis talking about? What is this timeline thing? And I went, oh, it's a real-time film that I made. He said, so you're a director? And I went, yes. You're not just an annoying videographer, right? And then, and he said, how do you know Francis? And I said, through Nicholas. And he went, Nicholas who? And I went, Cage, his nephew. And he went, how do you know Nicolas Cage? And I went, oh, I you know, through Leaving Las Vegas. He said, oh, we were involved in that film. So film history, obviously not his major, right? And I said, yes, I directed it. And he went, what the fuck are you doing here, you know, with your little camera? And then I guess so the relationship then developed like, it was strange because then I am a film director and I'm there. And then the attitude slowly started to change a little bit, you know. But I did my best for the first, like once years ago, I made a film with Billy Forsyth and the Frankfurt Ballet, and it was the same thing. For the first week, you know, the dancers are just watching you very carefully to make sure you don't get in the way. And then you gradually have a coffee and so on, and you get to talking, and then you come in that way. And if you came in with a big film crew, that wouldn't happen. You'd be the documentary film crew. So the joy of technology now is you don't need all that stuff.
No, absolutely. I mean, your rapport is palpable, and the kind of the relationship with the wider crew as well as the wider cast is also very notable. What kind of scale of shooting to edit did you have? How much more have you shot? How much more present were you? How did you start to construct and edit and decide priorities?
That was a funny journey, because the other thing that Francis or the production company informed me was like, we've got a great editor for you. Now, I always edit or choose my own editor. So I said, oh, he's an award-winning LA editor. And I went, I mean, not to go on about this much, he was a person I did not get on with at all. He was very rude. And he decided, he's incredibly well paid as well, which annoys me because, that was, but I didn't choose him, But he went off in his little editing room in LA that he decided he was going to make a film based on the archives, because of these amazing archives. You see a little bit of them. There's Paul Newman, there's everybody. And Francis is an archivist. So there's a ton of archive material. So the first cut was him doing the archives with me as kind of entertainment B-roll. I know some fun stuff on the set. But let's go back to the serious business of the archives, right? So I fired him. But it took a while, So then I had to go in and I edited it myself after that. I mean, there's some stuff of Joe's still in there because he did good stuff on the archives, and it's just that like making a feature film. It's like at what point is this too much, or because there is so much footage, And also, as I think I say in the documentary, is like, what's the story, And I think at a certain point I went, okay, the story is more about his conflict with himself, with his coming, and I think Beth, the production designer, put it really well. She says, he comes from a world that no longer exists in a way. That's not how, if you want to get into bed with Marvel Universe, this is very simple. You plan it 3 months before the shoot. The gaffer tape has to be in place, that's an anathema to someone like Francis, So that was clearly from the first interview with Beth, before we started shooting, I could already see the stress marks in her neck. And, she was like, it's a little bit, I think at this stage, maybe if we had maybe an idea of what it was going to look like, but it's going to be great. It's just like, wow, so much stress. And Francis had already stopped talking to her because I think her voice annoyed him, I mean, you got to remember that when you're making a film, you know, there's all the technical stuff. But there is stuff like that, you know, like, you know, that voice, asking me questions about the set again, you know, just like they're desperately trying to sort of give him what he wants, you know. And like the scene with the poor man's process. I mean, that was like 2 days before he said, I want everything. I want 3 railway tracks with perspective buildings going at different speeds. She went, okay. You can imagine this panic meeting that they then have, right, when they try and work out what the fuck are we going to do. Because they'd already planned doing it as a digital effect, right? So, yeah. I mean, you know, fascinating to watch this conflict, which I've seen in the past so many times with, you know, really great directors who become addicted to the equipment and the size of the crew. I mean, obviously Ridley Scott is the king of equipment, you know, but Kubrick also, and then Bertolucci, and then Marty Scorsese, they're all the same. They know in their heart they should really be shooting this on Super 8, you know, with a bunch of young, crazy people, right? But it's very hard to let go of, like a certain place says, why are there so many trucks? And I said to him, because you're paying for them, you know. They're only there because you bought them, you know, to put all the stuff that you ordered in, et cetera, you know.
Well, I mean, that's one of the real, you know, insights of the film is, of course, the budgeting of each department, you know, as you put it up on screen. And, you know, there's, you know, kind of revelations on a industrial level there. But I really like, and I'm sure the audience do too, your own asides to camera as you're going through the process, which now feel like, you know, an inevitable part of the film. But how early on did that happen? Because, or were you always planning that once you got a sort of sense of the operation that you would welcome and require for your film a real-time kind of aside, as it were?
No, I mean, I think we, you know, 1 week or 2 weeks in, you know, things started to happen, like with those theater games and all of that, you know. And at a certain point, I kind of thought, I need to comment on this, you know. And so it was just turn the camera around and have a chat with the camera, you know. And then it became a little bit, for my own sake, asking questions like, I'm not quite sure why he's doing this or what's going on. So, and again, because we were such a small unit, it was quite easy to do, you know.
No, I mean, very helpful. But also, let's just go back to this idea of sort of real time and the timeline, as he called it. Because, you know, obviously you're filming chronologically, you reveal chronologically, but you've got a very, very useful and insightful deployment of obviously what was primarily in each case, I guess, a single interview that you've done with various people that you then chop and obviously drop into at various points, which, you know, sets us in another timeline. We're obviously, you're aware that, you know, things are unfolding as they are by the time you finished. They're not. That nice tension evolves. Was there a sense when you were speaking to people that they were, I mean, they all seem very relaxed. I mean, maybe apart from Adam Driver, of course. Yeah. But otherwise, they seem very relaxed. They seem very at ease with you. How far into the process did those kind of core interviews happen?
Well, with Shire straight away, pretty much, you know, because he was very friendly. And also with Aubrey Plaza. No, that was a bit later on. But I was also, I mean, when you asked about how much other stuff is there, one of the things I became fascinated with is, like I say at the beginning, is how do you spend, by the way, it ended up as $170 million. You know, like, wow. So I'm really interested in budgets, you know, because you struggle to make a film for 5 million or for 500,000 or whatever. So every penny becomes, so I was like fascinated by, well, what does this cost? So I was asking everybody, what did it cost? You know, and then the gaffer, for example, because they were shooting 3 cameras at the same time. So I was fascinated by, you know, how do you light for 3 cameras? You know, no shadows. So I was finding out about all the new film technology, which is unbelievable. I mean, but really boring, but fantastic, you know. Boring for me, but I mean, just what they've invented in order to deal with the Marvel Universe kind of world in which they now make films, which is so expensive. So I was just like, oh, what does that cost? Yeah, like really boring questions, like, what does that cost? Because it's the most fascinating thing about the film in a way, is like, how did you spend the money? And what could you have spent the money on differently and had more fun, as you put it, you know, because he does want to have fun. Well, he says he does.
Obviously, throughout, there's a sense of, the celebrity presence and your, responses to them, your kind of questions to and with them. Dustin Hoffman comes off incredibly well. You kind of want to go bowling and have a pizza with him. He seems like an incredible guy. Those are the pleasures of that kind of, the kind of reveal that, we get behind the scenes. But for me, one of the real interests was what you've just been hinting at, with this idea of craft. Because there's an honourable lineage, of behind the scenes making of films that we all know. This one absolutely joins that. But it reveals craft on a day-to-day level much more, I think, than some of those other titles do. You see the costumes, you see the making, and you spend, decent time with that,
Sure.
Was that, again, something that you set out to do, or you just found that you had it?
I think so. From the very beginning, it was like, what a privilege to actually, be able to talk to Dustin Hoffman, John Voight, who'd made that amazing film together, and it's part of the kind of history of cinema, which is important to chronicle, and bless him, Francis, when you look at this, you see exactly where his heart is, what he wants to do. He's struggling with his legacy, if you like, this huge lumbering legacy of size, and that's to me was the issue. But at the same time, it's a filmmaker who's not like any other filmmaker. And he's a filmmaker that, has made some of the greatest films that we will ever see. So why you honor those people and you kind of try and represent them honestly, to give them also a voice, I think it's very, that Megalopolis obviously got hammered, and it is, let's say, a tricky film. Right, some people really like it, but most of the people didn't like it. Right, so I think it's important to see. Don't just write him off and say, "Oh, well, he's lost the plot" or something like that. He didn't lose the plot. Well, not that plot. He lost many other plots, if you like. But I just think it's important that for people who love cinema. I mean, as I think Giancarlo says, it's a remarkable thing that an 83-year-old man decides to blow all his money and make a strange film. Yeah.
No, I mean I completely agree, and I think it really serves the feature film, the original film, well, because it gives us an insight into this extraordinary character at the heart of it, who's spending his own money, as you say, which is not dirty money. It's from his own vineyard. He's really committed himself to it fully. He comes off, I think, despite the stresses of it, obviously at certain points, extremely well. Within it, you obviously celebrate him as you've just described. And the sense then now, of course, of this screening, which is a very particular kind of screening. It's an invite-only private screening. Give us a sense of where it's up to now with Megadoc.
Well, I mean, initially there was this sort of idea that it would be bought by whoever bought the film, but that didn't happen. In fact, Francis paid for his own distribution in the United States, another 17 million, There's belief in your film, right? So now it will be released in limited cinemas in the United States. There's an idea that it would go to the Venice Film Festival and maybe Telluride, something like that. Yeah, I mean, I've done it. They have it now. I don't have much control over the film anymore. I mean, Francis, the thing you should know about Francis, he owns everything. Francis needs to own everything he's involved with. So he actually owns the documentary. But he hasn't interfered. He hasn't sort of said, you've got to take that shot out or anything like that. We had a few little arguments about the art department because he was still hopping mad about them. But I sympathized with them rather than him. And I told him, look, you actually didn't behave that well with her. So he went, okay.
I think it's partly, isn't it, a little bit about time and distance from the original moment, or the wound, or the upset, if you like, because there are many folies de grandeur in cinema that after a certain point, we see again, and we see many rich things in them that speak to the moment.
There is an idea amongst the people who are going to distribute it to do it as a double bill, to re-release Megalopolis and show the documentary first, which I think would be an interesting thing. I mean, the thing is, I've had a lot of feedback from very young people who've got it, and they really like the kind of philosophical ideas behind the film. So they're not looking to criticize it on the basis of like grand film technology or whatever like that. They actually did respond to the message, And actually, the last scene in the film where Adam Driver does that speech, that was the first time I've seen it with people. It's a very beautiful speech, and you can't not be moved by that because it makes complete sense, you know. That was a rehearsal, actually. So I think what ends up in the film is much more dramatic, and personally, I don't think it's not quite as powerful, because the first runs through are very calm, you know. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm just proud that I made it. I'm very happy that I made it. I won't make any money from it, but I don't care. You know, I'm glad to have done it. I really am.
No, and I think we're all here extremely glad you've done it. And in the spirit, of course, of Coppola's own position in relation to the finance of the film, maybe it's kind of poetically suitable that you don't make any money from yours either, given that he's clearly lost a lot of his own finance circulating the film. But no, I mean, there's a poetry to this process in both films, I think, that is really wonderful. We are very short of time. It's over to you, the audience. As Mike said at the beginning, it's all about seeing the film with the audience, and that idea, of course, was communicated within the documentary itself. Please do take this great opportunity to ask Mike any thoughts, any questions you have. Thoughts, comments, responses, keep them concise if you could. We've got the mic, got lots of mics in the room tonight. Is there anyone who would like to kick off with thoughts and responses? Yes, please, down here. We'll start down here and we'll work our way back. Yeah. Could we use the microphone, actually? Yeah, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Hey, Mike.
Trudy, hello.
Thank you so much. This was so great. Such a insightful look into this film that I actually really appreciated, but I really love your doc. My question is, I noticed Eleanor turned up, you know, just sort of like for the 60th celebrations of their wedding anniversary, and she said words to the effect of, "Oh, I've had to be in LA and I haven't been on set so much." So it felt to me that she was undergoing some treatment because she passed away, I think.
She was very sick.
Quickly after. Without being too intrusive, how much did that impact the set, and indeed Francis having to make this, you know, huge movie without Eleanor for the first time ever at his side?
Well, I mean, there are a couple who've been together for 60 years. So I guess that, and Eleanor said to me, I don't know if anyone's read Eleanor's books, which are amazing, about the making of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
So she's kind of, you know, Francis is bipolar, bonkers, creative bonkers, and who has been a naughty boy, has, you know, like, you know, I think at a certain point, Eleanor decided, I have my life. We'll stay together. We love each other, but we're obviously, you know, we have our own idiosyncrasies, to put it one way. And so she and I think Walter Murch's wife became really good friends. And they have their own life. So she was, you know, she loves Francis. She'll always support him, always there for him. But I think, you know, they had grown into this couple, very, very strong couple, who had their own lives as well. And so she did. She turned up to support him, and it was quite wonderful. And interestingly, I got on really well with her because we were on the set, and she noticed my shoes, and she goes, "Allbirds, you're wearing Allbirds." And I went, "What?" This went on for a while. "Your shoes." So we bonded over the shoes, and then I interviewed her, and then I read her book, which is kind of up there with The Bell Jar as a kind of, you know, almost feminist work. It's wonderful. And I wrote to her, and she also saw the documentary in an early cut, and she wrote to me, quite funny, she said, "I really love it. Here are my notes." Okay, she's a Coppola. Okay, right, you know. So we had this very nice, and then I said, your book is absolutely amazing. And she said, "Oh, it's so great that people are still reading it." So we started to have this very nice email relationship after it. And then, and when I went, there's one scene where I go to Napa where I interview Francis after the film is finished. And it was really tough because they lived in Napa, and he came and he said that I thought she was going to die last night. You know, she had emphysema, and so they had round the clock nursing and everything. So we did that interview with that. So yeah, it was really tough. Yeah. So yes, he's dealing with that too, and he bought a motel, and you know, he's crazy. You know, he's bipolar crazy. You know, but I mean that's amazing. You know, like so many people are boring. He's not boring for sure. Yeah, but she was quite wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, please, here.
Thanks, Mike. I thought it was brilliant and very entertaining. My question is, how much of the documentary that we have seen was the reality, and how much of it was an edited story? Or put it that way, have it been edited differently? Would we have seen a different Francis?
How much of it was a reality and what after that?
If it had been edited differently, would we have seen a completely different set and report and dispatch from the making of Megalopolis, do you think? I think it's a question about reality and fiction, isn't it, in the documentary process with this particular making of?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you're making a film, which, of course, is a sort of entertainment too. So, and when you edit, you're making very significant choices, obviously, about what you want to put in and what, There was an idea, I don't know if it'll happen, which was that maybe if a platform takes this, there is enough material for maybe 5 episodes. So you could do it that way for people who really love watching paint dry, which of course we do with film. They're fascinating. And there certainly is some amazing stuff that isn't in that we saw tonight. So I don't know. It's a good question. I'd have to think about that. Yeah. I mean, how much, obviously you make decisions, the same as you do with a feature film. I mean, there's a side to Francis which is so grumpy. In fact, Eleanor said to me, he seems very grumpy when she saw the first edit. And I went, yes, it's because he was very grumpy. And so I then specifically started looking for the minority less grumpy, because he was grumpy all the time. He was always pissed off, But I mean, that's a director thing too. You just turn up and why is it so slow and all of that. But yeah, I did at a certain point try and make him more cheerful. I found some shots where he was smiling and things like that. It was like gold dust, right?
Thank you very much. I mean, one aspect I wanted to just ask you about briefly is about music. Much of the music is your own, and it's very well deployed. And there's a great sort of instinctive sense of when to actually cut away from the talking, to move away from the observational aspects of the filmmaking process and go into a kind of image and sound relationship. You seem to have a really strong sense of that. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised from your previous work. But again, what was your sense of that other language of film coming in between music and image? As somebody says, I think, in the film, the idea of the non-verbal,
I mean, sometimes I'd look at what they were shooting and I would find it quite dull what they were shooting, but the actual film set was like fucking amazing, right? So there's that whole sequence and they're walking on the girder and all of that. And you see all this technology, that every monitor is doing their own version of it. And there's like so much like focus of technology, and there's something so beautiful about the big picture. And I think I've always been fascinated by, I think everybody is. I think the reason why people like documentaries about film is you get to see more of, and David Lynch does this so beautifully where, like in Inland Empire, where, you go behind the set and now you're in a magic world. And I always feel that way about cinema, that the set is amazing. You see this amount of talent that's gone into creating this image. And then sometimes you see what the camera's shooting. It goes, what a pity they can't show the whole set, like all the bits, like the nuts and bolts, because it's somehow more interesting. Yeah. I also feel that people now, everybody knows it's fake, right? So it's like, why do we insist on keeping to this idea of, like we mustn't show the edge of the set or anything like that, We mustn't break the illusion of reality, but it's bullshit, So, I mean, in a documentary, you have license. You can do whatever you like. So you can go behind the set and try and steal a shot of Adam Driver.
No, I mean, absolutely. It doesn't in any way take away from the magic. It absolutely adds to it. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you for the question. Probably got time for one more question, if anyone would have it. Anyone want to close the evening formally? Yes, please, down here. And then, of course, Mike will be available afterwards, I'm sure, to speak more informally. Thank you.
What does Francis say about Megadoc?
He likes it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, he does. I mean, I was obviously clearly nervous at that point. I mean, everybody had the right to see it and take it. Adam was the one who said take out I had to take out all the shots of Adam Driver after his PR company saw it, including a really beautiful scene, which really sad I can't show you, where I went to Francis and I said, Francis, I have a huge problem with Adam. And he said, oh. I said, he said, leave it to me. And so they were on this set, So let's say I was over there, and they were even more over there, right? So I had the camera on my knee like this, pointing there, but I made a point of not looking at them like this. And Francis and Adam were down there, and I had a microphone on Francis, so I was getting a conversation. So Francis goes, I have a question for you, and you're probably not going to like it, but you know, Mike Figgis is making a documentary, and he goes, yeah, I know Mike. Yeah, we made a movie together, you know, me and my wife actually at the Mercer Hotel, and he did this whole thing. But while he's doing that, it's amazing, in the shot, which is not in the film because he took it out, there's this thing where he's looking around, and let's say, you know, say I'm the camera, he's going, yeah, I mean, I know Mike. It's like, and he spots that I'm over there, but I'm not looking at him, but he's like, he's pretty sure, he knows. I'm on a really long lens, right? I've got the monitor here. It's like radar. I mean, he knew it was there. And then, but it was kind of charming. And then eventually Francis said, look, you know, he's trying to make a film. Can you help us out? And he said, well, I guess if he's, yeah, maybe it could be like this. And then Francis is really charming. He said, you know, because we had the same problem with Brando. And I thought, genius. Genius, right? But of course, the PR companies saw that, Adam's people saw that and went, that shot's got to go, you know. So, yeah.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.